So yes, we sometimes think about food hubs as like a bicycle hub, where the spokes can be thought of in two different ways. The hub that I'm part of in Stroud has 85 different producers all selling through the hub. And there are producers ranging in size from, you know, somebody who makes jam in their kitchen and makes a few extra jars of jam through to huge horticultural projects over hundreds of hectares growing field scale vegetables. But all of those producers use a common shop front, and they feed in to a single shop front where eaters and buyers can come along and place an order for delivery or collection at a particular time. And so the other set of hubs are the people who are buying from the hub. So if you think of the hub as having producers feeding in and then eaters and buyers taking out from the food hub. And that's probably the only common element that all of the different types of food hubs have. And I'm going to try to this afternoon to cover as many different types of hubs as I can. But in my experience, every single hub is different. Every hub will base the model, its sort of operational model and its governance model on local requirements. Some of them are led by producers, some of them are led by community groups, some of them are led by private businesses wanting to add an online shop front to an existing business. And the beauty of the network in the Word Open Food Network is that all of those different hubs are using the same platform, and they can then connect with each other, and they can start to cross trade between each other and sell each other's produce. And later on, I will be talking about a project down in the southwest where there are now enough food hubs in the same geographical area where they are now connecting them up with a van that actually drives between the hubs and links up those 4 food hubs, and the hundreds of producers that are feeding into those 4 food hubs then get a much bigger geographical coverage for their produce. And we also get the situation where, excuse me, we also get the situation where the shoppers, because those food hubs are connecting up with each other, the shoppers get a much broader range of produce available because they're drawing on a much broader producer network. So I'm going to be sharing my screen. That means that I won't be able to see your questions very easily, but Maddie's very kindly offered to interrupt me as questions come in. So please, I really don't want to talk for 2 hours. It would be boring for all of us if I was to talk for 2 hours. So at any stage, please do interrupt, either with a question in the chat, and then Maddie will read that out, or if you'd like to unmute, I think it's a small enough group, there's only 27 of us, it will be fine for you to unmute and ask for more detail on a particular area I'm talking about, or possibly to make a point or add in a suggestion. I'm aware that there's a lot of experience in the room here. There are people who are running food hubs. As I say, Gary's got experience around public procurement. I'd really like us to see this as a shared learning experience rather than me talking about food hubs from my perspective. I'm very sorry, my partner's trying to get hold of me and she's currently in hospital, so bear with me while I mute and just talk to my partner. Very sorry.
Well, as I always say when I wake up every day, expect the unexpected and try and improvise if necessary. Does anybody know any jokes about anything? I heard a good one. It's Edinburgh Festival one. He said, I'm really hungry, the cost of living crisis. I tried to steal some spaghetti, but the shop had a new security guard and I couldn't get pasta.
Oh.
Not telling jokes, Jeremy, surely. I'm very sorry about that, people. It's not a medical emergency. Right, so yes, I was just saying, please interrupt. Let's make this interactive. Let's make this interesting. Please do chip in ideas and thoughts and suggestions or questions as we go along. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to start with a global picture. Please could Jeremy or Maddie wave if you can't see my screen, but if you can, I'm assuming we're good to go. So the story started 10 years ago in Australia. A group of food policy government, people who work for the Australian government in food policy were increasingly concerned about the state of food systems in Australia and food systems globally. And eventually they left their jobs and put their personal savings into writing a little bit of software to experiment with what would it be like to have a food network that was open source. And I talked a little bit earlier about the word network. I think it's really important that we build food systems that allow people to connect with each other so that we can build what I see as a mycelium. I see the Open Food Network as a sort of underground network that uses the software to connect some amazing projects that are happening, food growing projects, food rearing projects, food producers of every kind, brewers, bakers, anybody who's processing food or growing or rearing food, and to allow them not only to sell direct to eaters and buyers, but to sell through a very interesting network of food hubs, food banks, farmers markets, standard retail shops in the high street, anybody who's wanting to sell local food. And this mycelium, this piece of software, connects all of these things together. The word open is to do with the fact that this piece of software that has now grown over the last 10 years into this international map that you can see, 21 different countries, it's open source, which means that it is in common ownership. The Open Food Foundation, the charity in Australia, actually owns the license to the code for this software, but the code is under an open source license, which means that it is owned collectively, and anybody can take this code and set it up and run the software. The reason I'm banging on about this is that I think the reason world food systems are broken is due to the fundamental ownership model of many of our world systems. And I think if ownership and control is in private hands, however publicly interested those private hands are, there is a chance for that to be sold and to be taken over. And time again, we've seen food systems like the Open Food Network, proprietary software, that for various reasons has been withdrawn from use or taken over or changed in some way. A classic example was Food Assembly, which is a French company with a very clever bit of software that does something very similar to the Open Food Network. It was used in the UK up until about 4 years ago. There were about 60 different community food enterprises running food assemblies in the UK. And then the French management of the business were looking at the UK turnover figures and decided that the UK, the income to the company from the UK trading enterprises was not high enough, and they decided to pull the software. They gave the people who were using the software 3 months notice that they would be able to use the software up until the 3 months and then no longer. And the software was withdrawn from the UK, and these 60 community food enterprises had to stop trading or find a different platform, which is quite a big piece of work. So that can't happen with the Open Food Network. It is open source, it's in common ownership. And I believe if we're going to build better food systems for the world, we need to build them with different tools than the tools used to build the current food system. I'll get down off my high horse and talk a bit more about the history. We brought the software to the UK 8 years ago. It's now, as I say, in 21 different countries around the world. If we look at and those 20 countries all contribute suggestions and improvements and ideas to improve the software into a common code base. So the software is exactly the same in every single country. It looks a little bit different in terms of language, but the way the software works is exactly the same. And every Tuesday, we introduce a new update to the software. Every week, there's an improvement to the software. And that improvement is rolled out around the world every Tuesday. So we're all on the same code base. This is what it looks like in the UK. Every country has its own map. The map has thousands of producers shown by tractor symbols and hundreds of shops shown by these shop symbols. And if I zoom in to Stroud, where I live, we can see a little bit more detail. So yes, there are, as I say, 85 different producers feeding into a hub, which is buried in there somewhere. Some of these producers have their own shops. So this is a producer who, as well as selling through Stroudco Food Hub, also sells direct to the public. They may also be what we call a producer hub. They may have links to other producers in the network, and we encourage that. We encourage people to have multiple outlets, multiple ways to get their produce to market. So some of the hubs that I'll be talking about this afternoon are producer hubs, where maybe it's a farm with once a week they sell from the farm gate, and they take orders so that people can come on a Friday afternoon and pick up their pre-ordered veg. And if they're a producer hub, they will add in to that offering cheese from a farm up the road, maybe a few apples from somebody in the next village who's got spare apples this week. And they're bringing in produce from other producers to add to that offering. So let me tell you a little bit about how it looks from a shopper's perspective. So the Open Food Network is not for profit. We are not aiming to have any kind of ownership of the food systems. We want the ownership to be local. One of the core values of the Open Food Network is subsidiarity, by which we mean that we want decisions to be made at the most local level possible, so that we provide a global code base that is available to everybody. We provide a global governance structure that comes up with some guiding principles, these 9 core values. And then each country decides how the software is deployed. In the UK, we've set up a community interest company to hold the governance in the UK. That governance has 7 directors, currently drawn from existing food hubs or people with an interest in food systems generally. And those directors hold the sort of overall responsibility for the UK operation. But each individual food hub makes its own decisions. It decides which producers it wants to sell. It decides whether it wants to work to organic principles or not. And if it is working to organic principles, does it want certified organic producers only, or does it want people who are growing agroecologically? And because they're working at a local level, they can self-certify to some extent. They will know the producers in their area, and they can decide which producers they want in and which producers they don't want in. So here's an example. In my backyard, down in East Devon, they've set up their own website. So this is where their shoppers and their buyers come to. There's no mention of the Open Food Network here. This is them. This is how they work. This is how their collection points are set up, a bit about them, and their contact details. Behind that, if we were to click on their shop front, we then start to use the Open Food Network, but it's still branded as their local enterprise. We're very much into transparency. Every shopfront will enable the producers who are selling through that shopfront. So this particular hub has this list of producers, and the shoppers can click on any one of these producers and find the contact details for them. But the shop will make sure that every single product has the name of the producer attached to it. So the shopper can click here and read a bit about the product, and they can also click. Let me just move my Zoom screen around a little bit. They can also click here and find out who is this producer, who are they, how do they grow, are they organically certified, what's their phone number, what's their email address. If they had social media links, then they will be displayed here. And the other thing about transparency is we want the shoppers and the buyers to know how much of that selling price is going to go to the producer and how much is being retained by the hub. So obviously the hub has running costs, and the hub needs to decide how much markup it's going to make on the products in order to cover those running costs. So we can see here that if you were to buy half a kilo of apples from Elbow Farm, you as a shopper would pay £2.04, of which £1.70 would go to Elbow Farm, and the hub would make a 20% markup. And the hub is being really clear here about fruit and veg is 20%. The hub can apply different markups to different producers. So we've got some producers who aren't willing to deliver into our hub. One of them is Stroud Brewery, and that's no great hardship because we need to go to the brewery to pick up the beer each week, and they have a bar at the brewery so that you can pop in and have a pint while you pick up the brew. But because there's extra work involved in actually collecting from the brewery, we charge a higher markup, and that helps us cover those running costs. But it's all visible to the shopper, and that's the thing about transparency. And it's a pretty standard e-commerce shopfront. You can filter by the type of the product, and you can also filter by what we call properties. So if you're only interested in certified organic produce, if you're only interested in local produce, if you're only interested in plastic-free or whatever, then you can filter the products. When you do add products to the basket, you will then check out. And I'll just log in because I've shopped here before. And once I've put in my contact details and my basket is confirmed, I can then say how I want to pick it up. And again, each hub will set up its own delivery methods, its own shipping methods. Most of their pickup points are free. These will probably be things like cafes and restaurants, and you can, when you click on them, you can actually see exactly where the pickup point is. In these cases, the pickup points are offering a free service. Some hubs have pickup points where they make a charge, but for quite a lot of these hubs, it's a benefit to be a pickup point for the hub, because when people come into the cafe or the pub to pick up their order, they're likely to make a purchase in that pickup point. So quite a lot of pickup points will not make a charge for the service. But if people are asking for home delivery, then quite often there will be a charge. And this is quite a big thing about running a hub. You do need to think really carefully about home delivery, because it can be incredibly expensive to you and therefore quite expensive to the shopper. So pickup points are a really good way of sharing that cost. You can deliver 20 boxes to a single point, and people will then come to that point and pick it up, and that dramatically cuts the running costs of the hub. But if people are choosing home delivery, then that will be added to the basket here, and that is a charge that the shopper will pay. There's then various different.
Nick?
Yes, Maddie.
Just one thing that's popped up. So Poppy in Lambeth says, how do you cover the running costs of the physical site of the hub?
Great, thank you. Good question, Poppy. So mainly it's through those markups. So when we looked at the product and we looked at those apples and we saw that there was a 20% markup, that is the main income to the hub. That will be the way that the hub covers their running costs mainly. There are other ways. There is an option at checkout to create a payment option where the shopper can make either a percentage increase on their basket size, which will be a donation to the hub, or they can have an option to make a one-off donation at checkout to the hub. But those are the main ways, either as a markup or making a donation at checkout. Quite a lot of hubs will also take donations for other local organisations. They might take donations for a local food bank or for some other charitable cause in that local area. Many hubs will also, as well as taking card payments, will also take Healthy Start vouchers for people who are on low incomes. There's an option to pay cash or check on collection. So the hub manager can set up multiple options for taking payment. Rebecca, I can see your hand up.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to do a follow-up question to that, because there's the 20% that goes to the Open Food Network and there's the rest of it that goes to the grower. But I don't know if Poppy meant the bit that goes to, for example, in my backyard, and the person that does all the sort of local bit. Is there any percentage that goes to them?
Yeah, thank you. And that your follow-up question clarifies the fact that I haven't been clear. The 20% markup goes to In My Backyard.
Oh, right. Okay.
Not to the Open Food Network. So In My Backyard will say to their producers, please set up your products and negotiate with us whether you can deliver to us or whether we need to come to you. And depending on that negotiation, In My Backyard will decide what level of markup to apply. One of the running costs that In My Backyard is considering is the fact that any enterprise that uses the Open Food Network, if it trades more than £500 through the Open Food Network in a particular month, we will ask them for 2.4% of their turnover as a contribution to our running costs. So that 20% is going to In My Backyard, and at the end of each month, we will send an invoice to In My Backyard for 2.4% of their running costs. I will talk a little bit more about the pricing of the Open Food Network in a minute, but I can see that Leslie also has a hand up. I wondered if you'd like to come in there.
Yeah, yeah, it was about pricing, so maybe you're about to cover it, because some of our producers use the Open Food Network to sell their own produce, but if we want to put an admin fee on it, then we're more expensive than buying it directly from them.
Yeah.
And some of them are happy to give us a lower sales price so that we can sell at the same price as them. Yeah. But in that case, do we have to do it off Open Food Network? We can't do it through the system because the admin fee is added on.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and this comes up a lot. And because it's come up a lot, I mentioned earlier the weekly update. So a couple of years ago, we brought in some functionality that allows a producer to sell direct on the Open Food Network at a price that works for them, and for that producer to sell through local hubs. And the new function, well, the functionality that we brought in enables the hub to bring those products into what we call the inventory within the hub, and to then adjust the buying price for that product. So the products are listed as belonging to the producer. The hub brings them into their inventory and reduces the price by 20%, the price they're paying the producer, and then adds their 20% markup, so that the product then appears on the shop front of the hub at the same selling price as that product is appearing on the producer's shop front.
Can I just clarify? So, do you mean the hub reduces their price, or they reduce their price?
The hub reduces the price that the hub is paying to the producer.
Ah, on the incoming product?
Yes.
And do they have to have a particular permission to let you do that?
Yeah, the producer needs to give the permission. The producer needs to give the hub permission to add products to inventory, as well as adding products to order cycle.
Right. Okay. Perfect. That's wonderful. Thanks for clarifying.
No, that's great. This is a perfect example of getting into way too much detail. So we could easily spend this 2 hours talking about inventory and product, and I really don't want to do that. But it's a beautiful illustration of how this software has evolved over 10 years. By people saying exactly that. We need a way to have differential pricing and to still make the pricing appear the same to the shopper. And so the software has evolved to do that. And it's a constant process because food systems are changing rapidly. We are constantly evolving the software. Let's talk about pricing before I forget. So if you go to our About page, you will see this page. This is the packages, and if you are trading less than £500 a month, we encourage you to play with the software and experiment with it, see how it works. If you'd like to make a contribution and you carry on trading at low volumes, you've got the option to make a donation, but we don't require it. If you're trading less than 6,000 a month, we will ask for 2% plus VAT of your turnover. Once you get over that threshold, it's more cost effective for you to go on to the scale plan, where you pay a fixed price of £90 per month plus £75 plus 0.75 plus VAT. And as a business grows, we automatically shift you to the most cost-effective price plan. So we will charge you as on the most cost-effective price plan, depending on your turnover. There are some very big operations using the Open Food Network where this is too expensive. We don't need this bigger percentage of, you know, 500,000 turnover. So we do have some users who will make an agreement with us about a fair contribution, depending on how much user support they're going to need and the various different integrations that they might need to bring in other accounting systems and CRM systems to link to the Open Food Network. So we're pretty flexible on pricing, but that's pretty much the scale of it. Around about 2.4% of turnover for a small scale enterprise is a contribution to our running costs. So let's go back to the checkout. We've placed the order, we've said which products we want, we've said where we want to pick them up from, we've said how we want to pay for them. We would then click here and the shopper would receive an email confirming that the order they've placed, and the hub manager would receive an email telling them that order's come in. That's pretty much it from a shopper's perspective or a buyer's perspective. One thing to mention is if you're in Wales, then you can click at any time and change all of the words here to Welsh. I'm going to change that back because my Welsh is not good. So let me go back to English. But let's have a look at some of the admin screens. So at its most simple, the Open Food Network is a way for producers to list themselves. We saw the map earlier, thousands of producers. That's a searchable map. Anybody can zoom into the local area and find those producers who've registered on the Open Food Network. It takes about 5 or 10 minutes to register on the Open Food Network, and there is never any charge for a producer who is not selling direct to the public to list on the Open Food Network. So if all you want to do as a food producer is list yourself and have yourself there on the map so people can find you, there is no charge for that. If you decide to set up a shop front and start to sell those products direct from the farm, then those pricing schedules will kick in. But what's most likely is that a hub will find you and say, we're really interested in setting up a food hub in your area. Can we add your products to our shop front? And the shop front will then start trading, and that shop front will pay a percentage of their turnover to the Open Food Network, but the producer still won't pay anything. They will still fix their selling prices for their products. The hub will make a markup on them, but the producer is still not paying anything to the Open Food Network. They're just enabling the hub to make a markup on their products. What we're trying to do is to build as big a network of producers as possible. We want to fill that map with tractor symbols, tractor icons, because we want to encourage local food systems. We want as many people as possible to be producing and processing food as locally as possible. So the producer would set up on the Open Food Network. They would then appear on the map automatically. They would then come here. They would set up their products. If they had a large number of products, they would import them from a spreadsheet. But if they were just listing 10 or 20 products, they would put their name in the box here. They would say what kind of products, what's the name of the product? Am I selling it by weight or by volume or by item? So people sell, pots of flowers or bunches of carrots or whatever, so they can define it by an item name instead of by weight or by volume. But mostly it will be by weight or volume. And whether it's 5 kilo bag or whatever. What kind of category is this? And so we've come up with various different categories of products. Not only food products, so many people use the Open Food Network for non-food products, and that is an option. but you would choose the type of product that you want it to be. The producer would set their selling price, and that is the price that the hub would then add a markup to. Leslie, your question is inventory. Once it's been added to inventory, you can then mess about with it there in inventory. But talk to the support team and they'll talk you through that. The producer would also set a stock level. So particularly during lockdown, this was crucial. Many of our shop fronts were selling out entirely of all of their products during lockdown. And so it's really important that we don't oversell products. So the producers, we were encouraging them to be really strict and not use this unlimited box, but to actually specify exactly how many kilos of potatoes they had available, and to put a product description in there with as much detail as possible about the type of product, and then to load an image of that product. So the producer does that, they set up their products, they then go here to the Enterprises tab, they then give permission to the hub to sell their products. The hub would then set up what we call an order cycle. So an order cycle is a period during which a shopper or a buyer would place an order for delivery or collection at a particular time. So most order cycles will run over a week. Our food hub trades on a Friday. We open orders on a Saturday morning, having given the producers time to sort their stock out, and we close orders on a Wednesday morning. And then we then send the automatic purchase orders out to the producers. They then harvest and prepare the produce and deliver it to the hub by Friday morning. Some of the hubs I'll be talking about later have a daily order cycle. So there's a fish co-op in Plymouth that has a daily order cycle. So you specify which day you want to order, and then there's different fish available on different days of the week. Some people have an annual order cycle. So some of the farm shops that use the Open Food Network, they will have a permanently open order cycle. And as the orders come in, they will fulfill the orders, prepare the orders, and send them out to the shoppers. But mostly it's a weekly order cycle.
Got a few questions come in, Nick. Do you want to,
yes,
should I ask now, or do you want to?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I'll ask one to do with pricing because that's what you've been talking about. So what do you do if two farms have very different pricing for the same product?
Really good question. We try very hard to differentiate the product. So in some cases it's not possible. We had a situation where we'd set up the Stroud Cove Food Hub. We had found an organic dairy that was selling organic milk, and they were doing a great job. And then another organic dairy approached us and said, "We'd like to sell our milk as well." And it was really hard to differentiate organic. I mean, they were both homogenized, they were both organic. We talked to the original producer and they said, "Well, no, if you take on another producer, it's going to halve my volumes each week. I don't want to do it." And we, as a local community in our particular food hub, it's not a national decision, it's a local decision. We decided that we'd say no to that producer. Some hubs will make the decision based on geography. They'll use the most local producer if there's no way of differentiating. But what a lot of hubs will try to do is to encourage those two producers to talk to each other and to differentiate their products and to say, well, how about you sell your products packaged in a different way, or you sell your products in different volumes to me, or you sell your products with some processing. So rather than just selling, I don't know, onions, that you pickle your onions and sell them as pickled onions, and I will sell mine as raw, or whatever, and that does two things. One, it gives the shoppers a broader range of produce, and two, it supports two different kinds of producers, and those producers can start to, ideally, to cooperate. What we're trying to build is a different way of working in the world. It's not just about the software, it's about how do we as human beings work together. And it is possible to build a food system where the producers cooperate with each other. When we get on to talking about public procurement later, we can bring in some nice examples there. But rather than the producers being competitive and undercutting each other on price, it may be that we can find a way where they take it in turns and that each of them trades alternate weeks. It might be that they can cover for each other. So if one of them has a crop failure and they're trading through the food hub that week, the other one is willing to make their products available to that producer, and that they can support each other. Just while I divert, and sorry, Maddie, this is a long diversion, but I've talked about the Open Food Network as a software platform. One of the things that we're realizing globally and locally is that more and more the Open Food Network is about the people. The software is just there to facilitate it. And what we're actually developing is a different way of working, a way of working based on cooperation and collaboration and common ownership. And that, increasingly to me, that is more important than the software. If we're going to build a better food system for the world, we need to do it not only with different software solutions, we need to do it with a different way of being with each other and a way of cooperating with each other. Sorry, the big diversion. Maddie, what was the next question?
Very important diversion, thank you. So there's a couple from Rosie. So are managers of food hubs mostly full-time, or are they on that, or are they mostly also producers?
Okay, I don't know of any full-time food hub managers. There's one or two possible exceptions. There are some food hubs now that are really big and that run out of a warehouse, and they run multiple order cycles. So they might run 2 or 3 different order cycles a week with vans going out, 2 or 3 times a week, and some people ordering for Friday and some people ordering for Tuesday. They may well have full-time managers, but that's rare. Mostly food hub managers are part-time, and they'll be doing other jobs. Yes, some of them are producers, and they'll be adding their own products to the food hub, as well as running the software, setting up the order cycles, managing the team of people who will do the food sort when the food is delivered at the end of the week. But yeah, mostly part-time, and many of them actually being producers as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Do hub staff train producers on how to use the OFN software, or does OFN do that, or who does that?
A bit of
I'm
both.
just gonna say, just do a little time check. So it's sort of 7 minutes to 3. We'll take we'll go through a couple more of the questions and then have a break, and then come back to the others after the break.
Great, thank you. Really useful time check. I am running on a bit. Yes, so the question about sorry, Maddie, completely forgotten the question.
About training on the
training.
software.
Sorry, yes. So the Open Food Network does offer training. We have got a support team. The support team is made up of people who run their own food hubs, and they work part-time for the Open Food Network. And there are some videos that are specifically designed for producers to how to set up yourself on the Open Food Network, how to go through the registration process, how to set your products up, how to give permission to a hub. So those are all available to the producers, and as you get more familiar with the software yourself and you sign up new producers, you might well want to do that yourself. It's a really simple process to set up a producer and to set up products, but a bit of both, sometimes done by OFN, sometimes done locally by the hub manager, and sometimes producers training each other to do it. It's pretty intuitive software, and quite often it's teenagers of farmers who do it. The farmers don't want anything to do with the software, but their teenage children will do it for them.
Great. Jamie's got one. Is there anything within the software that ensures producers are local to the hubs, or is that left down to the hub to decide which growers to work with?
The answer to the question is there's nothing in the software that limits which producers you can sign up, because we have this principle of subsidiarity where decisions are made at the most local level possible. And we're based in Stroud in Gloucestershire. We're about as far from the sea as you can get, and we still want to eat fish. So we do have an arrangement with Soul of Discretion, which is this fish co-op in Plymouth that I mentioned earlier, and we get our fish delivered in freezer boxes in bulk, all of our orders together, delivered to the hub and then split up and sent out to the individual households. Some hubs will be buying olive oil and almonds and olives and figs, which are traded from producers in Portugal who are registered on the Open Food Network as a producer because they want to sell in the UK. But the carrier is an organization called the Sail Cargo Alliance that uses big old sailing ships that cross the Bay of Biscay, and they make their money out of people who want to go on sailing holidays and sail across the Bay of Biscay. But the hold of these ships was empty, and they realized that they could actually link up with producers in Portugal and Spain, load up the produce, and as the ship's sailing back, they can use the Open Food Network to sell what's in the hold of that boat. So when the ship arrives in port, all of that produce is pre-sold, and they have a port party where people watch the boat come in. They have music, they have food, people pick up their produce. So there's all sorts of weird and wonderful things happening with the Open Food Network. We don't set limits on the geography, but if you want to do that, then you have complete control on which producers you add to your order cycle. The screen we're looking at here is all about which producers have you got on your order cycle, and you as the manager of the hub will decide which suppliers you want to add to that order cycle. Any other questions?
Yeah, we'll just have one more before we break. So from Beth, we run a climate hub in Guildford in Surrey. Looking in Surrey on the OFN map, I think you have very few producers listed. How are new producers recruited?
It's a mixture. We do have connections with organisations like the Biodynamic Association, who've recently asked us to add all of their producers to the OFN map. And then they're going to have a subset of that map. It's possible to set up groups within the Open Food Network, subgroups within the Open Food Network, and show a map only of those producers. So we're doing a sort of a map for the Biodynamic Association, but that does involve them having their producers registered with OFN. So that's a really good way of getting, they've got, I don't know, several hundred producers that will be joining the network and will be available to sell their produce. But the main way of producers being populated on that map is by people like you interested in setting up a food hub and knowing that there is a farmer down the road who you want to sell their produce, and you approaching that farmer and saying, would it be okay for me to add you to the Open Food Network, get permission from them, and then you do it for them. You get their name, their address, their postcode, ideally get a list of their products and their prices, and you do it for them. It takes 5 or 10 minutes to set the enterprise. It takes, about a minute to set up each of the products, and they would then be on the map, and you could then add them to your food hub. They would then be visible to other food hubs in the future. They could start to sell through other food hubs. But you'll notice that map is very patchy, and the reason you have a sudden flurry of activity in a particular area is because somebody has set up a food hub in that area, and they are populating the map with the producers that they're interested in trading with. And then once the hub is there, other people hear about it, and then they will add themselves to the map because they want to sell through the food hub. So it's a very local process, and yeah, we don't have any budget to go out recruiting producers. It's all done by word of mouth.
Brilliant. Thanks, Nick. Let's just have a 5-minute tea break. So come back at 3:05. And if you wanted to have a look at the chat, you needn't, Nick, but if you do, we've got to, it's Rebecca, it'll be Lawton's question is the next one.
Great.
In the chat to get to if you wanted to have a look, but we'll read through them when we come back as well anyway.
Yeah,
thanks, Wendy. See you all at 3:05.
Nick, if you could stop sharing your screen for a moment, that'd be helpful.
will do.
Thanks.
Cheers, everyone.
Hi there, Nick. It's Poppy here. I'll take myself off video. Being as you're just sitting there, I'm going to ask you, I had a work call probably when you answered my question, which was about, do you mind me asking you?
No, of course, go ahead.
So I missed what you said, and that was, how is the cost of the physical hub? Is there a physical hub? And
Yes, normally there's something. So we use a church hall on a Friday morning for 4 or 5 hours.
Oh, right. And so then you pay them a kind of small.
Yeah, we've done a deal with them that they get a percentage of our turnover. So I think we pay them 1% of the turnover, which is encouraging them to promote the food hub. But yeah.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea. That's a really good idea. And then one more question. Do you mind me asking you?
No, it's fine.
I'm making the most of this.
Yeah.
So the cost of transport and stuff, like, basically I live on a council estate in Lambeth in London. So it feels like setting up a food hub is something that would be quite difficult actually, because we're not that close to many growers who are growing significant amounts of food, you know.
Yeah.
And so then my thoughts are like, so within your one in Stroud, do you pay for the fuel to go and collect all the produce, or do the producers deliver it to you?
Mostly the producers deliver it to us. If we're having to go to them, then we make a bigger markup on those products.
Right.
So you can change the markup depending on which producer you're looking at.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, that is one of the biggest costs. And I don't know if you were around when I talked about home delivery can be a real killer for food hubs.
I missed that.
Yeah. So
I had a work call, I had to take it.
Yeah.
It was to do with some funding. I was like, I can't not this call, but yeah.
No, sure. So yeah, if you are thinking about doing home delivery, think really carefully, because it can be very, very expensive. All of the big supermarkets are still making a loss on all their home delivery services. And they're doing it because they want market share.
Right.
And of course, we don't have the benefit of huge profits to subsidize that. So what we encourage hubs to do is to have pickup points. So to have a cafe or a pub or a community centre or a school or somebody's backyard where you can drop 5 or 10 or 15 boxes in one drop, and then local people will then come and pick up from there.
Yeah.
And it works well for cafes and shops, because if the cafe or the shop is a pickup point, when people come in to pick up their box, they're going to buy a cup of coffee, or they'll go to the shop. So it is a
yeah, we have actually, there's a green vegetable distributor in our area called Local Greens, and they source vegetables from just as close to London as possible, and then they work on the same model actually, which makes a lot more sense.
Okay,
thanks for that.
Poppy, I'm really interested that you're in Lambeth. We've got a little bit of funding recently to really focus on London. So there was a question earlier saying, you know, what do you do about the gaps in the map? And we've got quite a gap in our OFN map in London. And we've got a little bit of funding to support community groups in London to start food hubs. So if you're interested in that, I've just put my email address in the chat. I wonder if you could drop me an email and I'll put you in touch with the people who are.
Yeah, sure. And if it doesn't work for us, I'm sure we'll be able to connect you, you know.
Great.
Connect up anyway.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick.
No problem. Leslie, did you have your hand up just now?
I did, but I guess it's getting into more detail, so maybe it's best to wait till the end. But I guess the big problem I have with having pickup points is how those pickup points don't have freezer space. So how do I keep my meat frozen at those points? Does that other hubs must have this?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of things. Some of our pickup points do have freezers. So, you know, some of the shops that we delivered to, some of the cafes we delivered to, they will know that there's going to be orders coming in on a Friday, and they will make space available in their fridges and freezers. The other thing we've done is we've invested in insulated carrier bags and freezer blocks, so that if an order includes frozen or chilled produce, that produce goes in at the last minute, just before the orders go out. The chilled and frozen stuff is picked into a insulated bag with a freezer block. And we've checked with the local food standards people, and they are happy that there is a certain length of time. I can't remember what the length of time is, but as long as the shopper picks up within that time, then that food is safe for a period of time. Okay. So we just make it clear to people using the pickup points, if they've ordered chilled and frozen, they have to pick up by this time.
Yeah, and do you add a cost on for those bags that you have to buy?
Some hubs do. Some hubs ask for them back. Some hubs charge a deposit for them. But that is a cost. People don't return their bags.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Sorry, Maddie, we're taking questions, but
no, it's great. That's great. So hopefully everyone's come back, and do put your videos back on if you want to. So we'll just carry on with the questions that are in the chat, and then I think you're going to talk a bit more about some of the examples of existing food hubs and the food loop, and how some of the kind of where you begin or other elements. Yeah. So B, do you want to ask your question, or do you want me to read it out?
Yes, I can ask it if you want.
Go for it.
As long as there's some work happening outside. If they start drilling, then I'll stop. But yes, so I wanted to know, do many people do door-to-door deliveries as part of it? And would it be too complicated to have some drop-off points to door that are en route to enable, for example, elderly or disabled people to get it dropped to them? I asked because local delivery schemes just gone under in the Glastonbury area where I am, and they're really keen to try and maintain for elderly people that drop the door-to-door deliveries, even though I think it was the expense of doing door-to-door for everyone that made it not work financially.
Yeah. And again, this is a question that's come up a lot, and so there is now a functionality within the software that allows us to tag customers. And what that means is that we would apply a tag. So it happened a lot during lockdown. So we had the tag, some of the hubs used to set up a tag called vulnerable. So anybody who was vulnerable or anybody who was a key worker, they were tagged. And that meant that when they got to checkout, they would be able to see an option for home delivery, but it would not be visible to anybody who wasn't tagged. And in the same way, the tags can be applied to products. So we have a goat milk producer in our food hub, but they produce a very limited quantity of goat milk each week. And we have a membership scheme. So some people choose to be a member of our food hub. They pay £2 a month to be a member. And one of the benefits of membership is that you get tagged as a member, and members can see the goat's milk before other people do. So the members get a chance to order the goat milk. And if the goat milk is out of stock by the time the tag is removed, other people won't be able to see it. If there is still some goat milk available, then it will be sold to non-members. But there is a tagging system, so that enables a different shopping experience for different people. They see different products, they see different shipping methods. They might even see different payment methods, because some people don't have a bank account. And so we need to have an option for people to pay cash on delivery, but you don't really want to offer cash on delivery to everybody, and then people don't pay. So it's a way of customizing the shop front.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you for that.
It's fine.
Right. Just pick up on Leslie's point about freezers. Alison's put something in the chat saying if hubs are at centres that deliver a community benefit, they might be able to get a donated freezer from a white goods firm with a friendly letter.
Great idea.
Definitely. Bethan, you had a question next. Do you want to read it out?
Please, why not? Hi, Nick. Hi, everyone. So I've got the question more to do about procurement and how the Open Food Network can deal with business-to-business sales. And if you've got some good examples of that, please.
For sure. So I don't know if Gary is still around. I can see he's on the call. It'd be really nice to have his input to this. Yes, he is here. Gary, you're probably better placed to answer the public procurement one if you're happy to do that.
Yeah, sorry, repeat your question. I was multitasking.
Sorry, it's how does the Open Food Network offer, what's the Open Food Network doing towards public procurement?
Yeah, so I'll try and give you a brief overview of what we're attempting to do in Wales. And it's basically, we believe there's a model out there that exists that food hubs can be the point of aggregation for better local produced, more sustainably produced food into the public plate. And we've got some funding via Welsh Government to test that in Wales. We've set up 2 new food hubs, one in North Powys and one in Carmarthenshire. And they're becoming the brokers between the local authority buyers, if you like, the procurement team, and so in North Powys, for instance, we've got a route into schools in one particular town, and that's a range of high schools and primary schools in North Powys. In Carmarthenshire, we've got a route into a care home and into a country park setting, so much more of a tourist-focused country park setting, 2 very different places, different menu requirements, different opportunities to influence the menu. Obviously, very much more health and nutritional focused in the care home, but equally quite traditional in what it might offer as well. And the job of the hubs is to work with the local sustainable food places coordinators, and that's a key element of it. So the people that are talking to the local authorities, talking to the communities, creating those networks, find the buyers. The challenge then is to find the growers to match the quantities that are needed, the quality and all that sort of stuff. And what we're asking the hub to do is to be that sort of, as I say, that aggregation model. So bring the produce in, bulk it up, deal with the accreditation in some cases that's required. So things like SALSA accreditation for care homes, school meals have to reach nutritional values in Wales, etc., etc. And someone's got to do a bit of homework on that. So we're putting that on the hubs, and the hubs then have to work with their local growers networks as well and work out what can be supplied in. And then I guess there's a bit of everyone haggling over how much procurement should pay for this produce that hopefully is clearly better for people and for the environment. And what we're aiming to do as the pilot is to test a few sort of models within the produce. So we want to test nutrient density. So we're working with the Griffin project, and they'll be testing produce coming through the hubs and out into the school plates or into the care homes. They'll be showing the nutrient density of the produce at the front end, so on OFN, if that's how they're ordering. They'll also be monitoring, capturing a sort of a carbon figure for the produce going through the hub as well. And what we're really trying to do is to say to the public procurers, you should be willing to pay a bit more for this food because it's better for the planet and better for people. Now, however, and I know some of you have listened into other conversations, where that's been done in the past, particularly in some of the other European countries, Copenhagen and stuff, it hasn't actually increased the value of the produce. But I guess that's all right if we shift the buying habits through an ecological sort of more sound system, as long as the growers are comfortable. And as you know, many of you people involved in growing produce, it's really hard to grow fresh produce anyway. And if you can grow it and sell it to your own wrapped up market locally anyway, why would you bother trying to meet a procurement contract with a lower value? And the answer is you probably wouldn't, unless you're a bit of a glutton for punishment. But what it might help you do is deal with gluts, and it might help just a number of small scale growers that just for whatever reason they've grown stuff and worked really hard to grow it, but they can't shift it quick enough. And that's one model that we hope could be an element of it. So how that you can bulk up those kales, those courgettes and things like that at the right price and still get them out. So we're having to be honest, say it's a real pilot. We want to see if the model can work and which bits do work and which bits don't work. We know there's loads of interest in better procurement, but it's all right talking about it or writing about it or saying to people this is what we should be doing if the systems aren't there to match it. So this is just our way of piloting the opportunities that might be there for smaller scale growers, but actually where the opportunity probably exists is to shift farmers and help them transition from field scale sheep and beef in Wales particularly to some fresh produce as well. I don't know if that helps answer your question.
Thank you, Gary.
Could I come in with a little bit more on that as well, just in relation to a question that was asked earlier about different farmers, because one of the things we're finding is that obviously if the OFN platform is hoping to aggregate like produce from multiple things, and obviously going out the other end on a for as far as the public sector is concerned, it is very standard product that they want at the other end. So it's going to be quite interesting to see what the OFN team come up with technologically wise in terms of kind of divvying out the contracts to the different growers and meeting their needs and meeting the public sector contract needs, and balancing price and balancing kind of other inputs that are there. So some products, you know, they might all be grown agroecologically, but some will be more nutrient dense than others. And how do we kind of standardize that across? So that's going to be a really interesting development for OFN, and hopefully that's some kind of technology there that, so kind of we're investing in the OFN platform there that can then be used by other hubs elsewhere, which is really exciting.
Thank you, Alison, and thank you, Gary. And yeah, that point Alison just made about everyone benefiting when somebody comes up with a new idea and we develop new functionality, everybody else benefits from it. So some of the functionality we're using in the UK now was, you know, people in Costa Rica saying they'd really like to have this functionality, and because it's the common code base, we all get to benefit from it. I'm really aware of time, and I know that Laura wants to come in with a question, but I just want to finish off the answer to Bethan's question. She was asking not only about public procurement, but about business to business. Duncan, my colleague, my friend who was here and was going to talk about Cambridge Food Hub, is running a business to business hub on the Open Food Network. The book that I mentioned earlier and put a link in there does cover that. The other thing that I'd encourage you to have a look at, let me just share my screen again. On the Open Food Network homepage, the homepage openfoodnetwork.org.uk, if you go to the resources tab on the homepage, I said earlier, we're not just a software platform, we're into, you know, building a community of people working in a different way. So there's loads of resources on the Open Food Network page here. And one of them is about case studies, and I'd really strongly suggest that you have a look at them. One of them is about Cambridge Food Hub. So if you scroll down to the bottom, I think it's the last one. There we go. Basically, Cambridge Food Hub is, and I'll put the link in the chat. Can I do that as well as screen my screen? The Cambridge Food Hub basically does something similar to, I'm just putting the link in the chat there. The hub is selling entirely to businesses, so it is aggregating products from multiple producers and selling that product into cafes and restaurants and so on in Cambridge. I'd encourage you to have a look at that case study. If you have questions about it and you want to know more, please do contact me. I've put my contact details in the chat and I'm really happy to talk more about that. I hope that's okay, Bethan. And I know Laura's got a hand up which might be relevant to where we're at now. So should we take Laura's question next, Maddie, before we move on?
Thanks. Yeah, I want to interrupt Gary from his multitasking again. It's really cool, your brokerage role. What's your plan, because presumably that is currently funded and then over time it will cease to be. What do you have sort of a plan for that to sort of pay for itself, or what's going to happen after the funding runs out?
Yeah, it's a good question, Laura. And from our point of view as Social Farms and Gardens, this isn't a project we want to host or continue to work with. This is very much one that we want to put out there into our membership and into the community groups on the ground. So what we really are aiming to do is to get through the pilot, just to test which bits work and which bits don't work. And probably we're going to need to go and find a bit more money to then retest all of the good stuff and scale up, because we're looking at supplying a few institutions in a few areas. That's not a massively robust pilot, but there's enough political will out there, I think, particularly in Wales at the moment, to change our procurement system, as there is in England as well. So I'm fairly confident that we can tap into some more money to make this work at a much bigger scale, particularly through what we have called regional growth deals. So areas of investment from Welsh Government in specific, more urban targeted areas. Cardiff, Mid Wales is a region, Swansea is a region, etc., etc. I'm fairly confident, and Nick and I have talked loosely already around how we look at bidding into those rounds of money, upscale the project. But what they ultimately have to do is to stand on their own 2 feet, and that's where they'll probably become that model of most hubs trading through to their communities, but some on the back of that reaching out into the public purse. Because to be honest, we've had a little bit of flack from wholesalers saying, look, don't we do this already? And it's like, well, you do, but actually the figures in Wales, only 8% of the produce that's traded through the public purse comes from Wales. So they're not really that bothered about where their produce comes from. They're bothered about volumes and quality and price in the main. So we're just trying to shift that balance a bit. So we do think that there's an opportunity for micro businesses to survive on the back of more ethical trading platforms into the public purse. It's difficult. Everyone's under pressure. Schools particularly are under massive pressures. They have a rubbish school meals budget. They have to meet these nutritional values, etc., etc. So price, we know, is the critical point. And what we don't want to be doing is crippling growers to grow produce that they've had to work really high at to get a really poor price from it. So I guess the pilot needs to ensure that we can get the right value of the products through to the growers as well. And if not, it's just not worth doing. Why would we? We definitely wouldn't want to support that.
Thanks, Gary. Great. Nick, do you want to just go into what you wanted to share in this second half? I recognise there are a couple of outstanding questions in the chat.
Yeah.
Do you want to carry on and we can come back to those?
Definitely. And I have just put my contact details in the chat. So anybody who doesn't get their question answered, please do contact me afterwards and I will. I'm really happy to talk more in more detail later. So I wanted to come back to this idea of scale, that what is happening with the Open Food Network is that we're finding there's a real synergy when multiple hubs set up in the same area. There's all sorts of synergies that kick in. The presentation I'm showing you now was a presentation that was made at the Oxford Real Farming Conference in January of this year. And it was presented by a group of people who are using the Open Food Network in quite different ways, but in the same geographical area. And they got a little bit of funding to join those hubs together. They have now called it, they've renamed it the Good Food Loop, because the Southwest Good Food Network is a little bit too close to another project that's running down in the Southwest. So it's now called the Good Food Loop. They're down here, down in the Plymouth area. And there are 4 hubs shown in orange there, which are in that trading in that area. There's also 2 what we call producer hubs, Solid Discretion and Forest Fungi, and those 6 shop fronts decided that they wanted to link link themselves together. This is a horribly complicated map slide, but it basically shows that there is a physical van now that is actually owned and paid for by Tamar Grow Local, which is the Tamar Valley Food Hubs. And this van once a week does a loop around these hubs. It doesn't actually do this hub because these people have their own van that does home deliveries, but they want to link in to the network. So there are two physical vans, one owned by this hub and one owned by this hub, which between them create an incredibly rich network of producers. So each one of these hubs will have somewhere between 20 and 100 producers selling through them. Some of the producers will be selling through 2 or more of the hubs in this network. Some of them will be unique to one particular hub. But by joining them together, the shoppers at all 4 hubs get access to all of those producers, and the producers in those hubs get access to all of the shoppers in all four hubs. And the benefits are obvious, really. It has increased the turnover of all 4 of those hubs, and they've got some things wrong. They tried it with too big a geographical area at one stage, and what they've decided to do is to keep the driving time between the hubs has to be no more than 45 minutes in order for this thing to be viable. And they're still tweaking the model, but there are definite financial benefits and environmental and social benefits of joining up the food hubs. I'm not going to go into too much detail on that. It is something that we're experimenting with in North Wales as well. There was a question that came up earlier about about the financial viability of hubs. One thing I did want to mention briefly is that Welsh Government, through Social Farms and Gardens, has funded 5 food hubs in Wales and actually paid the running costs of those food hubs for the first 18 months of their trading, which is hugely insightful of a government to be able to do that. Almost all the food hubs that I'm aware of have been started either by a producer who is, wanting to build their business and giving a bit of time to build up a producer hub, or by volunteers who set up a community food enterprise of some kind, and they do it from the goodness of their hearts, and they spend quite a lot of time deciding how it's going to be run, setting up an organization, building the enterprise, finding the producers, finding the shoppers, running at a loss or running at no profit for the first few months. And that does limit the sorts of people who can set up food hubs. It does need people who have got that amount of spare time to do that sort of thing. So yes, funding to set up food hubs has transformed what we're able to do in Wales, and we now have 5 new food hubs trading in Wales that wouldn't have been there without that Welsh Government funding. Having said that, it is possible, and it has been done time and time again, to set up food hubs on a voluntary basis. There was a question in the chat about how viable are they, and the viability depends entirely on the business model. So if you can find the right producers with the right products and enough people who are willing to buy those products, there's lots of wrinkles in there. Like when I say the right kind of products, you need to have the basics in there, but you also need to have some high value, low volume products, like possibly alcohol, like meat, like all sorts of products that have a high retail value but are relatively easy to handle. Meat is less easy to handle than alcohol, but if you do invest in an alcohol license, you can then start trading beer and wine and cider and so on that you can store in the food hub, so producers don't have to deliver it every week. It has quite a high retail value, it has a long shelf life, and you can make a good markup on that, and that can really help make the food hub viable. But as long as the business model is sound, then within, I've known food hubs to be financially viable within 6 months of trading. Some take as long as 18 months to get viable. It's incredibly difficult at the moment with the cost of living crisis. People are economizing left, right and centre. So many food hubs are having to really focus on how to provide affordable food to people on low incomes. And they're doing that in some incredibly creative ways, using the OFN software in various different ways, enabling people who can afford to pay a bit extra for their food to pay it forward. And they have things like, you know, buy a veg box for a neighbour you haven't met yet in your area. That then creates a bursary that the food hub is able to apply so that people who are on a lower income can use an OFN system to self-certify as low income. So they don't actually have to ask for charity. They can simply go to a different link on the shop front, and that will then automatically tag them without any human being being involved, and it will give them access to lower price food. So we're trying to improve food dignity here so that people don't have to ask for lower price food. And those food hubs are surviving because they are trying to provide a service to all of the people in their community, that the people who are into local food and have enough disposable income to buy local food and are willing to pay a little bit extra to support people in their community who can't afford to buy agroecologically grown local food. I'm really aware of time, Maddie. What other questions have we not covered that are out there still?
There was one about insurance. Is there any insurance cover for food safety issues? Is what's covered by the producer, what's covered by the hub?
Yeah.
And there's also a question about the timescale for the results of the public procurement pilot. I guess that's.
Okay. So I'm going to give Gary a bit of time to think about timescales for results of public procurement while I talk about insurance. Insurance, I have a constitutional reaction to the word insurance. I find insurance a very difficult thing to organize, to come to terms with, but it is necessary, and it is important that the food that is sold through the food hub is there is some insurance cover for that. So most of the food hubs that I'm involved with do have some kind of insurance. The reality is that the liability for any problems with that food rests with the producer. So what would happen if there was a food safety issue? The authorities would follow it up with the hub. The hub would need to prove that they had handled that food safely, and that they'd done everything that they needed to do. In all likelihood, they will have done, and the issue will have been from the producer. And then the hub will, the claim, if there is a claim, will go through to the producer. So the producer either needs to be trading a product that is safe, which is probably fruit and veg generally, and that doesn't need insurance. But if they're processing food in any way, then they probably do need to have some kind of insurance, because the likely claim is to go through to the producer. So it's one of the things we make our producers aware of, is that if there is a claim to any produce that is sold through the hub, the likelihood is that the claim will come back to the producer, assuming that the hub has got its food handling procedures in place. What we find is that local food standards people in local councils are very supportive of people setting up food hubs, and they will help you and advise you on what insurance is necessary. And the Open Food Network community of food hubs, we have a Signal group, we have a Facebook group where people share ideas, and they share information about what kind of insurance they've got, where they got it from, how much the insurance costs, and that kind of thing. But yes, insurance does need to be looked into, and we do have a party line, which is that yes, you need insurance, and we also have a personal opinion, which is that I think insurance needs to be minimised, because it's all part of the global machine that is broken. But I'm not going to get into another ethical rant about insurance. Gary, there was a question about procurement. Are you okay to follow that one up?
Yeah, fine. We've put a couple of chat messages in there as well, but our current pilot project runs till June 23, so June next year, and obviously we'll be pulling together a robust final report based on our evidence. But what I did say in there, if you're generally interested, at any time come and ask Alison or I, happy to chat about it, show you what's going on, link you in with the hubs so you can ask direct questions to the hubs. Yeah, and on insurance one, I suppose I was directly involved in a number of food hubs for a good number of years. And I guess as we expanded our insurance costs considerably, but you have to look at where the risks are really. That's what you've got to analyse to the best of your ability. It depends how you're constituted, how you're set up as well, and what you then might need to insure. Because if you're working with volunteers, technically you have a responsibility for those volunteers, and therefore they're treated in the eyes of law as employees. So you've got to have employers' liability cover, things like that. You might have to have physical premises cover. We took out products liability. We were shifting produce around in vans, some of it frozen, some of it fresh, and things like that. And we decided there was a significant risk of losing produce in transit due to an accident or something. So we covered things like that as well. But I think sort of Nick's right. You end up just perpetuating the insurance cycle. The more you do, the more you feel you've got to insure. Whereas actually we probably could have lived with a loss once a year that probably never really happened anyway, and not wasted all the money on insurance. I hope that helps.
And in the 8 years of trading, the Open Food Network trading in the UK, there has never been a claim through a food hub for any food issues, if that helps you assess the insurance risk.
There was one thing about can somebody make a living from managing a food hub? Somebody's wondering whether that might be something they would like to do.
Yeah. So again, it's all about the business plan. It's about how have you got enough people who are willing to buy through a food hub? Have you got the right producers in place? Is that viable? But once you're sure about that, yes, if you can get grant funding to kick it off and try it out, that's ideal. And there's a couple of ideas in the chat there of the different ways people have got funding. And if you follow the Open Food Network, if you sign up to one of our any of our social media feeds on our homepage, then whenever there's community funding available, we do post it on our social media feeds. So we do point people at community grants when they come out. And setting up a food hub it ticks loads of boxes for many different grants. So it is possible to get a grant to set these things up. But yes, we are paying living wage to all of the people who work on our food hub. They work very part-time. The manager is, I think, 2 days a week. And then there are people who come on a Friday morning to help sort the boxes. Some of them do it on a voluntary basis, some are paid. But we budget to pay a living wage to everyone who does essential work for the food hub. And that works. It depends hugely on the area you're working in. And of course, we're in such uncertain times at the moment that I'm definitely not going to make any promises about any business being viable over the next, coming months and years. But what I do know is that during lockdown, every food hub that was set up, their sales went through the roof. The total turnover through the Open Food Network platform went up by 850% in 7 weeks during the first lockdown. And what I notice is the world becoming increasingly unstable, and that we will need local food systems like we've never needed them before, as climate issues start to bite, as economic issues start to bite, as political instability increases. I think we're going to need more and more resilient food systems, which means building food systems that have producers close to where the people are who are going to eat that food. So yes, I can't make any promises, but I believe that this is something we need to be focusing on, trying to build more local food hubs of many different types. I haven't shown you many different food hubs. We talked about the Cambridge one, business to business. We talked about the public procurement one. We looked at In My Backyard. If there aren't any more questions, I'd like to quickly show you the one in Plymouth, which has a slightly different way of running. Would that be all right?
There's one, Nick, just
Yeah.
an interesting one about information. What information is out there to show how food hubs can be better for climate, net zero, etc. When people want to try and go for funding for food hubs? Is there evidence to support those funding applications?
Yeah, there's a really supportive community. As I say, there's over 100 hubs across the UK, and those are all very different in very different ways. Many of them have been successful at getting funding. So if you were to join our Facebook group or to follow us on social media, you would be able to say, I'm putting together a funding bid. I'm really interested to talk to anybody who's done something similar to what I'm looking at. And people do regularly share their successful funding and successful and unsuccessful funding bids. So you can pick, cut and paste stuff from those funding bids. We've also had some success nationally and got some funding for the Open Food Network nationally. And I'm really happy to share some of the text from those funding bids if you get in touch with me. Very happy to help with that funding. And in terms of data, that's one of the biggest resources that we have, is that over 8 years of trading, we've built up quite a fascinating database of the buying habits of people who are interested in buying local food, and the selling habits of producers. What kind of products are they selling? What prices are they selling for? And we are hoping to get some funding to do some really interesting analysis with that, which would then support people in their funding bids to look at what has the Open Food Network created in terms of local food systems, not just in the UK, but we would ideally like to do that analysis across all 21 countries using the software. So if it's okay to share my screen again, let's go back and have a look at, stop doing that. Okay, shops, where are we? My food. So I'm going to take you to the list of Open Food Network shop fronts across the UK. So this is the Buy Food tab on the home page. These are all the currently trading shop fronts. That was In My Backyard. We had a quick look at just now. This is the one I wanted to show you, Soul of Discretion. So this is an inshore fishers co-op. So there's about 15 or 20 different fishers. They have their own website, and most people will come to them through their own website, but I've just taken a shortcut to their OFN shopfront. And their landing page is their notices page, because they're using the Open Food Network slightly differently. And they make it really clear that before you place your order, you have to choose which day you want to order from, because they've set up different order cycles for different days of the week, because they want to get all of their orders for a particular day together at a particular time, and then their workers will then process those orders, prepare the fish, and send it out using freezer couriers. And they actually have a national home delivery network, so they use a courier to do national home deliveries. So you basically choose which day of the week you want to buy your fish for, and they will not just fish. They've linked up with other producers to sell chocolate. I didn't know about that, but yeah, you can then choose what the different kinds of fish. And if you were to add some fish to your basket, fish boxes, you could then, when you check out, I think there is an option to pick it up from the fish key in, yeah, you can pick up from the fish key in Plymouth, but mostly it will be for home delivery. and you can choose when you want it to be delivered. Put some comments in there about where you want it to be delivered, and then take the card payment. So that's quite a different model, in that they have a daily order cycle, and they are quite an interesting organisation, in that they're a cooperative of fishers, and they've got very high ethical principles in terms of the types of fish that they land, particular species of fish that are not endangered, and their fishing methods. So that's their big selling point. And many of the hubs in the UK do link with them. They get permission from Sole of Discretion to add their products to the order cycle, and then they can offer Sole of Discretion fish to their local shoppers, and then they will put one big order in to Sole of Discretion, get that fish delivered to the hub, and then share it amongst their shoppers.
Brilliant.
Any other questions? Any other closing comments?
So I guess, Nick, for people in places where there isn't a food hub yet,
yeah.
To kind of go through, like, what are the foundational kind of pieces that you need to put in place?
Yeah.
And is there an order to those? Yeah, that some of those sort of starting steps to get things going, and who in your place to bring into that work at the beginning.
Yeah. So there's 2 or 3 key things to think about. One is venue. There were some food hubs that sprang up during lockdown that were literally somebody's front room or their front yard. They were aware of people who, producers who had produce in their fields that they couldn't sell because it was maybe polytunnels full of salads that had been grown for the hospitality trade, and all the cafes and restaurants were closed because of lockdown. So there was all this food going to waste, and all the supermarket shelves were empty. So people were using their front rooms. They were putting this produce up online. They knew the local farmer. They were putting the produce up online. People were ordering, and then they would come to their front yard to pick up produce from the front yard. But generally, most people would have a hub with some kind of premises. We hire a church hall for 4 hours on a Friday morning, and we have the produce delivered into the hall, and then we sort in the church hall and deliver out from there. So do you have a venue? Do you have enough producers? So there are certain core basics that you do need to have in place. I'd suggest that you do need, potatoes, onions, carrots, so a few basic vegetable products available. Ideally, connecting with some people who can add a bit of interest to that. There's almost always someone in every village who would be willing to bake cakes, or might have a few jars of jam, or has apple trees in their back garden. So think very, very broadly about who are your food producers. It doesn't have to be a farmer with field scale veg or with a herd of cattle. It could be people who maybe have allotment surpluses. There's a popular misconception about allotments that you can't sell produce from an allotment. The Allotment Act states that the allotment must be for the primary use of the allotment holder or his or her family. As long as most of the produce is going to the allotment holder, they can sell surpluses from their allotment. And there's a document I can point you to which will confirm that for you. So talk to your local allotment association and see if people might be interested in selling surpluses. Yeah, explore your producer base. That's a key one. Venue, producer base. And then look at, do you have a big enough market? Are there going to be enough people around who will be willing to buy from the food hub? You'd need to get some prices. So you need to talk to your producers about what price do they want for their produce. You'd need to do some business modeling to look at what kind of markup you want to make in order to cover your costs. But then explore with people. One of the new hubs I'm just working with has sent out an email to 10 or 15 friendly local people, asking them would they use the food hub if it had these products at these prices and this kind of delivery schedule, and is getting some feedback from them. The people they've approached tend to be well networked local people. So think about people in your community who would be able to try this out for you, or at least sound it out with their friends and families. One of our local networkers we used when we set up Stroudco Food Hub was the lollipop lady outside outside the school, which we were using as the pickup point. When we first set up Stroudco, we were using a school hall as a pickup point, as not a pickup point, as a distribution point. So we use a school hall on a Saturday morning to pack the produce and so on. And we realized that the lollipop lady, the crossing lady, she knew everybody. She knew all the parents who were coming in and out of school. She also happened to be a school governor, so she was very connected with the school PTA associations, or the teacher networks and so on. She was also involved in a local community association. And so she was a perfect person to try this out with and get an idea of, would the food hub be viable in this area? So yeah, those are some things to knock around. Bethan, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I've unmuted myself properly, haven't I? So we're in Nottingham and excuse me, unfortunately we decided when the previous assembly closed down, we didn't go with the Open Food Network, and that was an error. So we're now Neighbour Food. It works in relatively the same way, apologies. But one thing that we have found is that we went from 250 at the peak of lockdown from a normal range of 50 like most people did. So it was crazy, it was stupidly crazy. And we have now gone down to normal numbers. But we have also found that people like the experience of shopping, like they enjoy the act of shopping. So the people that you get on board of the food hub are the people that get the local food system. They're going to be your regulars. So ways to get unconventional people in on board is by having like a monthly farmers market or a taster session. So the veg box people will come and they'll fry up some veggie burgers, and the fish person will come and they can try something there. The jam person will have all their jams and chutneys open, and the cake will have all of their cakes and little bits for people to try. And then everyone comes in, tries a bit of the food, and then orders for the next week, because we were finding that without that regular face-to-face contact of the food producer, it was just like getting a veg box delivered without that really key component missing. So since COVID, we've gone back to that, and it's been really useful. I just thought I would add that in.
Thank you, Bethan. That's really helpful. And you're right, there's something about the online experience that is a bit impersonal, and it's nice to make it a bit more personal. And yeah, getting the producers to come in and meet the shoppers is a really sweet way to do that.
Great. Just say that Alison's dropped in something about what you mentioned about allotments, a link there into the chat at the bottom of the chat. So we're coming to the end of the session, and it's been brilliantly helpful, Nick. So it's just the beginning, really, and we'll do, let's kind of keep going, and we want to, UAC and OFN want to be able to support all of you and wherever you're at in your journey, whatever you need to do next. And I love the way that the software is kind of evolving symbiotically with the community, and that, it's that to really kind of enter into a different way of conceiving and thinking about the way that the food system can be animated and sort of energized through relationship, and that the software is there to sort of support and enable those relationships to kind of thrive and continue. I know that Jeremy's going to kind of give a few closing comments. I wondered if you wanted to say anything about what next, Nick, and also, as we said at the beginning, if you want to stick around beyond 4 and talk about specifics to do with your place, please do.
Thank you, Maddie. No, just a big thank you to you all for coming along, and wish you all the best of luck with your plans. I will put my contact details in the chat again, and I'll be always happy to talk to anybody who wants to knock ideas around or point you in the right direction. And please do, poke around on our website. There's a lot of resources there and different ways of engaging and becoming part of this human community. There's the Open Food Network that has the software in the background. I'll hand over to Jeremy. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I haven't fallen off my stool yet, but I'm getting a bit tired. But really interesting, because I've known Nick now for about 4 or 5 years, bumping into him at Oxford Real Farming conferences and other places, and he became a founder stalwart of the Urban Agriculture Consortium Steering Group, as we call it, the COG group, and has been extraordinarily helpful, as indeed have all the COG members. But I think this session puts in perspective where UAC sits amongst this big network of joined up people thinking about like-minded things in a cooperative way. And I know you've gone into a lot more technical detail than I ever come across before with this, but in a way that we can all understand it and it all makes common sense, because that's because you've got the human touch that we can all relate to. So that's great. And what next? Well, the first thing is that we had 29 participants in this session, now down to 20, which is always the way as we go on for 2 hours. But from Berlin up to Belfast, I think, and Brighton and all stops in between. And that's sort of pretty much our audience, normally somewhere between 25 and 40 people. The next session is the 17th of November, and we'll be talking with our digital mapping food mappers community. We'll send out more details to that in the e-news in due course. But there's a few other things just to mention. So the Food Mappers Network is meeting online next Monday, the 26th. If you want to be involved in that, drop us an email. We'll patch you into that. Maddie's actually going to Leeds. Now we're coming out of the COVID period, I think. I don't know, really. I'm a bit scared of it, really, myself. But Maddie's going to Leeds on Tuesday for a digital mappers group in Leeds. And I'm chairing a session at the Land Workers Alliance conference on building better food systems in Manchester. Well, it isn't Manchester, it's Stretford, near Old Trafford, I believe, somewhere. And I'm chairing a session on policy, planning and building systems for more resilient food systems. And actually, during this conversation, I've had emails from LWA and from people in the speakers in my session sort of saying, hang on, we've only got a few days to sort it out. So that's really interesting stuff. Then on the 3rd of October, there's a session with Andy Goldring from the Permaculture Association talking about how permaculture design can help you set up new farm start projects from day one. So not as an afterthought, but integrated into that. On the 5th of November, I believe there's a session on setting up farm starts being run by the Kindling Trust. And just to say thanks again to Nick and Maddie, but I might get in touch with some of you separately. We, as I mentioned earlier, we're funded by the Esme Fairbairn Foundation, as indeed is the Open Food Network and many other of these projects. We are hoping to be asked to submit a new expression of interest in the next few weeks. And that's actually at Esme's discretion. You can't simply go and put one in, but we're optimistic about that. But what I always like to do in our applications is to have little snippets of quotes from people from the network, because it's all very well me saying this is what I think, but actually just a 2-liner from somebody in Lincoln or somebody in Berlin or somebody in somewhere else, and people, particularly more grassrootsy people than we're sort of infrastructure people. So we've got your email addresses, so with your permission I might well take some people up on that, and I'll stop there. Rebecca's just got her hand up, I see.
Yes, thank you, Jeremy. Can I just do a cheeky plug to all of you here for our Good Food, Good Farming March, which is on the 15th of October in London, but we're also having events in Cardiff and Edinburgh in the week following. If you look at the Land Workers Alliance website, you'll see what it's all about. But in short, it's to try and draw attention to the fact that our food system is broken and we're all fed up and want change. So we really want to get as many people from across all these different networks as possible to it, to make it really big. I mean, it'll be happening in future years, but we really want to expand this and to let people know that we need change. So please come along and encourage all your networks to. Thank you very much for letting me do that plug.
Great.
Is it worth mentioning the Manchester conference as well?
Oh yes, well, Jeremy's just mentioned it, but yes, we have got a Building Better Food Systems conference next week in Manchester on the 28th and 29th of September, and it's basically about building up short supply chains, farmer focused supply chains, whatever you want to call them, direct marketing. And we're really trying to explore. The first day will be both in person and online. The second day will just be in person. But I think there are still places to register. So again, go to the Landworkers Alliance website. Oh, it looks like it's been put in the chat. So thank you, Bethan. But yes, it should be a really, really good conference, bringing together people who really want to scale this up and get it beyond being just people who are in our networks, to enable other farmers to access it too. So yes, please come along for that.
Brilliant.
Oh, thank you, Maddie.
Thank you. Thanks everybody. Thanks for being here. And yeah, we'll circulate a link to this recording and to anything interesting that's come in through the chat, links and so on afterwards. And these recordings go on the UAC YouTube channel. And I'm going to stop recording now. And if you'd like to stop talking or stop recording, and yeah, do stick around and chat to Nick or us if you'd like to. Lovely to see you all. Thanks a lot.
Bye.